Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 676, recorded the weekend of May 20th. I'm your host, Patrick. This week's screenshot, Mordraith Adventures with Friends in the 554th DDO screenshot of the week. Sending in this week's screenshot. Yeah, a nice little shot of a couple of the pets and dinosaur stuff. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can catch us through Twitch, YouTube, the DDO forums, iTunes, or from our website at DDOCast.com. DDOCast is hosted by Cyber the awesome podcast hosting network, and shows are usually available within a few days of recording. The next show will probably not be next weekend, Memorial Day weekend, but you can stay updated by following us on our social media pages or our website at DDOCast.com with our calendar. On the podcast this week, we have another Ask the Devs. So we interviewed Tolero. Injuria was along for the ride as well, so that'll be on the back half of the show. But first, we'll get into the game news. There's not a lot this week. They did release a page about the making of Tabaxi. So if you're interested in the kind of the design process and creation process of how that creating a new race, specifically the Tabaxi, looks for SSG, you can read that. It was kind of fun. There's not anything like earth-shattering or it's not really game knowledge or anything like that, but just kind of an insight into the creation process for them. The other bit of news this week is that they are released the following statement. We are hard at work getting Isle of Dread ready for further preview and its eventual release, and we want to share with you today an updated release date. Isle of Dread will now release on June 22nd, 2022. I believe it was previously June 8th. The raid is expected to release a few weeks after the initial release of Isle of Dread, as has been done with our prior expansions as well. Thank you. I'll pick a small bone with the raid thing, and that it started out with here's one of the two raids, and then we'll release the raid a little bit after. Now it's become we're only going to give you one raid, and it's going to come a little bit after. So a little disappointing in that, getting fewer raids and stuff. There you go. Bonus days. DDO bonus days brings you the Mimic Hunt now through May 25th. Sales for the week. It's Monster Madness. You get 25% off of Monster Manuals, Slayer Boosts, select pet certificates, and tricks and companion and pet renames through May 26th. You can also get a Jeweler's Toolkit with the coupon code PLUCK, PLUCK, through May 26th. Also available for limited time are Tensor's Weapon Boxes. You can find them in the store through May 26th. A little short for a little sale like that, but I'm going to hazard a guess and say that they are... look, it's Memorial Day weekend. It's a holiday. I'm just going to kind of go on a limb and say there's going to be some good XP boosts and maybe double bonus points, maybe even autos boxes, something to that effect. That's kind of what I... expect something along those lines coming up here shortly. I have a little bit of lightning post. Rachel Letters wrote in on YouTube. Yes, Teal does make dino noises response and even curls up at the shrine. So cute. Also, Shifter was not a cat. It was a were-type animal. I'm stoked for Tabaxi, and I've already have two that they're running, one iconic and one not. In terms of making 20 to 30 quests more meaningful, it would be easy to spice them up by having more secret rooms with treasure, gold, and named items. Completing optionals could result in higher chances for named loot, too. Create more add-on discoveries, that would be great. They always try to do everything in quests because it's more fun. The optionals is always going to be kind of this weird thing. How do you get players to do something that's going to take longer to do and make it meaningful? Fortunately for 20 to 30, at least kind of the lower-ish levels, optionals that are just giving you more named loot. I mean, that's just for a lot of players. If once you already have your gear at that level, you're kind of just talking about food for sentient weapons. But for new players, sure, that's definitely a thing, and they've done that before. There's the quest Search and Rescue, which has this really long optional, which has its own set of named loot. I'm not sure how successful that really was, because it was a really long option. It was as long, double the length of the quest, really. But yeah, they've tried various things with that to various degrees of success. It's working in the raids. What they're doing with the raids right now, where you get an extra chest with raid runes and stuff. So that's pretty effective. Salt Marsh, you do get the extra bits out of the chests for optionals. I tend to do kind of the shorty. Hey, here's a monster boss right on the side. Like those are optionals I like. The ones that are like way out of the way, I'm less inclined to do personally, because I'm kind of cruising through stuff. Rachel continued saying, honestly, if SSG fixed the lag, that would be the singular improvement. That would be a literal game changer. Yes, I think we can all agree on that. Otherwise, they say it's wonderful and they love DDO. I'm happy you found a game that you love. Zentomb wrote in that personally, they think Tabaxi has been a fairly solid release. The low tier racial tree has some uniqueness, but nothing overpowered compared to the other races. And the tier 5 is plenty rewarding in terms of easy access to evasion and movement speed. And the SLA Vigor comes in handy for the lower levels when many classes don't have any healing. For example, they have 15 racial action points, so for a small investment of 3 to 4 action point, they pick up evasion and SLA Vigor, 30% run speed, and maybe even defensive roll if they have a point to spare, which is great value, especially in heroics. Yeah, I'm sure you can get a lot of great value there. It's great points there. Right, so that's going to close out the boring part of the show. Coming up next is our interview with Tolero and Cordovan. Thanks to everyone for listening to the show, and thanks to Jerry and Cordovan again, or Cherry and Tolero again for joining us this week. And to all the folks who contribute for DDOCast, to Standing Stone Games, Wizard of the Coast, and to Cyberbears for hosting the podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit our website at DDOcast.com, or you can support us on Patreon. If you have a DDO-themed webpage or you Twitch DDO and you'd like to be featured on our website, you can email us at ddocast@gmail.com. Hit us up at ddocast.com for show notes, MP3s, our calendar, previous shows, and other fun stuff, including various adventures in DDO, D&D tabletop, and even some other stuff. If you have a comment on this episode, a question you'd like to hear us answer, or a topic you'd like to hear us discuss, or you just want to say hi, leave a comment or email us at ddocast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media and follow us for the latest cast updates at DDOcast on Twitter is the best place. So stay tuned for our interview with Tolero. Hello, welcome to Ask the Devs on DDOcast, another fun one here. I'm your host, Patrick. This week we have DDO's newest producer, Tolero. And we also have Cordovan, our community manager.
Hello, nice to be here.
Yeah, welcome back, sir. Always good to have Jerry on the show. And yeah, so we're just gonna get to interview the DDO producer Tolero, and just kind of give us. I know you've done a couple of interviews, but just kind of want to start with hello Merlask, because I remember that name. And maybe just kind of give us a 2-minute, like a flyover of your history with DDO.
Yeah, so I started playing DDO just after launch. I was a player originally, and then at some point, some of you DDOcast listeners, especially those that have been around for a while, would remember that I used to contribute segments on DDOcast. I used to have a roleplay segment, and then I would do in-game events, and eventually got picked up by the company, and then from there, I've done all kinds of different things with the company in the marketing group and the business group, and then now, most recently, now I'm the producer on DDO specifically.
And community manager at one point too, I think, right?
Yeah.
Or like the precursor to whatever that was at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And
it was pretty much over a couple of years.
I think notable that I believe you have two NPCs in the game named after you.
Yes, technically, there's one that's formal, right? Which is you can see me. I give out. You turn in your prizes from the anniversary festival on the little NPC that'll sit in House Fierlin and in the Hall of Heroes. And then technically, there's a secret hidden one, which is in the Shroud. There was the skeleton, and under the hood in data, somebody had named it like some amalgamation of like all my nicknames kind of mashed together.
Mhm.
So give us an idea of what is the producer? What do you get to do with DDO now in your new role? And what are you excited to be bringing to that role?
Sure. So it's always really hard to describe what a producer is for folks that don't like, they're not in the industry. But like the closest thing I can approximate it to is like it's kind of like being the director of a movie, kind of. But you're essentially, you're part facilitator because you're helping to make sure all of your team members can get what they need to get done, or that they're on the correct priorities, or if something is stopping them from doing something, like if maybe there's a resource they need, or they can't figure out a question, or whatever it is, they'll tend to come to you. And then another part of the role is sort of setting the 10,000-foot direction for the whole game, right? So you're like, this is where we want to be going, or this is what we want to accomplish with a new system, or these are what things we think need to happen based on data that the business group has discovered. And then part of it's being the face, like, moments like we're having today where we're doing this interview where you can come and, talk to fans, talk to press. Besides, obviously Cordovan's out here all the time as well. But so we're one extra presence that can talk to the public too. So that's sort of like the really really distilled version.
Yeah, I think we actually met at PAX Prime like many
Oh, I'm
years
sure.
back.
Yeah, yeah.
Long
I've,
long time
I've I've
ago.
gone to a lot of the trade shows over the years. It's a lot of fun, with the pandemic and everything. I've really kind of missed it. But it was always great to be able to go and not only talk to people that actively play the game, but then also kind of watch new people approaching it and just seeing like how they react to. And there's just so much fun that comes with those kind of events. But meeting, people from DDOCast, we've done that for many years. I think like the very first party I ever threw was like with a whole bunch of DDOcast folks.
Yeah, I think that was probably right. I think I was there. That was 2007. I think.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
Been
good
around a
times.
while.
yeah.
But one of the last ones was also for DDO folks and folks from the other game.
Yeah.
So, and I actually think we'll probably be doing another meetup again at some point here. I don't know if it'll be this Gen Con or something else, but I would imagine something.
Yeah. As things start to kind of open back up again, that's been a big part of this. Some of the shows just haven't been available to go to, or if they have been available, people are like, "Oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to go." And so, as things progress, hopefully, fingers crossed, then we'll be back in a place where we can get out and do these kinds of things again. Not that
Yeah,
I don't dislike being able to meet remotely, because that's kind of the nice thing is doing something like this is like significantly easier, a lot less overhead to be able to just pop right on here, right?
yeah. I mean, I did fly out to do an interview once, this one
That's
time, but that's
true.
a little more a little more inconvenient. There was a lot more
That one,
packaging
that
to
one's
do.
like special occasion mode, right?
Well, yeah, like I was really out there to do things like go to Fenway and watch a baseball game, and go and see my grandma and some
Yeah.
family, and like, oh well, I guess I'll go over to the Standing Stone games because it's in the same area, kind of a thing. But yeah, it's always fun to have that interaction, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we're gonna some questions that we got from some listeners and folks. And kind of a big question going on these days is the VIP program. And you've mentioned a few times that you're looking at rethinking that and stuff. So maybe just kind of bring us up to speed. Where's SSG in that process? And then also maybe you've said, hey, we're looking for feedback. What's a good way, the best way for players to give feedback about what they'd like to see in the VIP program?
So definitely, we try to watch lots of different places where players are giving us feedback. So I don't necessarily need a person to be like, oh, you need to be on this particular platform to give it to us. What's more helpful is for me to describe for you the type of feedback that we're looking for. And it sort of falls in three buckets when it comes to VIP. One of those buckets is, what are things about the current program that you're like, ooh, I would really miss this perk if this went away. Like, ooh, don't get rid of this part. This part was really awesome. So that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is, what are things that you're like, oh, I wish that we could fill in the blank. Like, what's a thing that you wish VIPs could do that they don't currently get to do? And then the last part of it is to think about, let's pretend that part of the change to VIP, because I think this will kind of dovetail into, I'm sure, another question that people often are asking right now, especially after we went through all those rounds of doing the free quest giveaways. What would VIP mean to me if it wasn't just about getting in quests? And so then, what do you expect a program like that to do? When VIP first started, the purpose of it was to be sort of like a hand-holding sort of experience for everybody who's used to playing a subscription-only game at a time when free-to-play was very new to basically this market. Most people weren't used to paying like a la carte and doing microtransactions or anything like that. And so the VIP program at the time was to be like, hey, if you're scared of free-to-play and e-stores and all that, just keep subscribing. Life will be normal for you. And now here we are, what, 13-ish years later, free to play now. You've had a whole generation of humans that have grown up in a world where there's free to play. And so that's not really as imperative anymore to be like, oh, I gotta carefully ease you into a free to play. Instead, it's, okay, what does this program mean to me if it's not just about quest access? And so we've been going back and forth, right? We saw so many people coming in when we opened up the floodgate of the content, kind of chewing on it, like, oh, maybe, is this something we would want to do ongoing? Because there's some games that's what they do. They just let you right in the quests, and then it's other things that you can acquire. And some of them are like, oh no, we still keep everything locked down, but then you're paying for a VIP type plan, and that's how you get. And so we're sort of one of the few real true hybrids in the market right now. And so we're like, okay, sometimes what happens is if we have a big, interesting idea that could work in either of our titles at SSG, we'll sort of rock, paper, scissors for who wants to go first, because the other one is going to watch how it goes. And so right now you're seeing that a lot with some of the activity that's happening on Lord of the Rings Online, where they've just had their 15th anniversary, they're doing a bunch of giveaways, and some of those giveaways are permanent. And so they're going to be going through that same process of, okay, you can get in all this content, now what does it mean to be VIP? And they have different gameplay on Lord of the Rings than we have, and so it kind of changes that dynamic a little bit. But our very first thing was we wanted to see, as we're going through this process, if we find that it's like, ooh, there was a real problem doing this, we couldn't figure out how to make it work, then it's like, well, maybe we won't change that over here. So we're observing, we're so early in that piece of the process, because that's only been a very short time. But so far, so good. And so now in the DDO side of the fence, we can start already thinking through, okay, what would it mean if being VIP isn't about quest access? What is VIP about? So some things I can tell you right off the bat is it seems like everybody likes daily gold rolls. That is a thing that, as best I can tell, we've gotten very positive feedback about. We tried it to see if people would like it. And so I'm probably going to be looking to extend that as we used to just do once a week. And it's like, it's not hurting anything to let the VIPs have it once a day. So why don't we just keep that? But I'm also very interested in what are those other things that you're like, oh, I wish that as a VIP I could just, well, what do you wish that you could do? And the places that we look for that kind of feedback, any places where you can engage with us from a community level. It could be some of the player-run communities where you're sort of aggregating up your thoughts up to somebody, like a DDOcast or like some of the other ones. You could be posting directly in, like, say, the community forums. You could be writing our Facebook page. You could be adding us on Twitter. Just wherever you feel like doing that is fine. We have a lot of eyes sort of spread everywhere watching for this. And then I will aggregate it all together. Because what I'm looking for is, what are the ones that keep coming up? Where it's like, in this community, they keep talking about let's pretend it was they wanted VIPs to get a pie mailed to them every, week. Like
I'm
pie
pro
keeps
pie. I like
servicing,
this
right?
plan.
Right? Um, but it's like I want to see what are the things that commonly keep coming up, because those are the things that are going to make the program work for people. Is it's something that everybody's like, yeah, that would be really cool, or ooh, please don't take away the such and such. It was so good. Like, how much do people care that they get automatic access to Hard and Elite Unlock, by default, or is everybody else has to kind of piecemeal pick that? Or do they care about the fact that you get a feature that other people can't buy? Like, they just straight up cannot use their DDO points to get that feature. Like, how much does that exclusivity matter to you? So those are the things we want to know about the program. Then that's what's going to help us rework it, because to rework it, it's going to be a little bit of engineering work, it's going to be a little systems work, possibly even some art, depending on what the features are. And so we have to be able to build that into the schedule.
I would just piggyback that a little bit to say that we're not starting from zero here. We're not starting from the starting line on acquiring that feedback as well. We have been reading what you've been saying for years on this subject, including some of the recent conversations. Like, I know there was one not that long ago, maybe even kind of actively ongoing, about could we find teleportation methods for VIPs? Some of those things. Hey, I want to bring my friends over to the quest with me. That kind of systems engineering level stuff is a pretty big ask. But we still want to hear it, right? We do want to hear how valuable that is to you. Is
Yeah, and
that,
sometimes we've
that kind of
prototyped
thing?
some of that
Yeah.
stuff, right? Like
Yep.
the teleport idea, we've pitched several times internally, and we've even had a couple people look how hard would this be to do? And there's some interesting problems for us to work out, but we've looked at it, and that's one of those ones that's kind of high on our list to be like, okay, if we're gonna do this, this one's one of the top ones we want to figure out. Because the other thing I don't want to do is sort of piecemeal it. I'd like to do a bunch of them so that people are like, okay, here's what the program is. Because if we're just kind of sprinkling it at you constantly, you're like, I don't know, what am I getting as a VIP?
I'll throw a bone out for Samus. The remember my build and repeat the build and character creation process button.
We've talked about
Yeah.
something like that, yeah, like a sort of a build copier type function.
Yeah.
The not that there is a problem per se, but the problem is generally not brainstorming on cool
Right?
perks.
Yeah.
There's lots of great things that we can do. It's often trying to, what makes the most sense. What can we fit into a tight engineering schedule? All sorts of other kind of things, and a lot of that kind of we would love. I know we would love to have a preserve my build kind of thing. I
Yep.
mean, that would be amazing. Who wouldn't want that, right?
Yeah.
So, but obviously that's a pretty big ask, and so that's not to say never or anything like that. But it's easy to come up with a lot of good lists like that. But we're not just looking for that list, although we do want to hear that. We're also going to be taking that list and then trying to kind of funnel it through the process to get the most bang for our buck here, I think.
And one thing that can help too a little bit in terms of when you use as a player when you're thinking about this is the sentence that you're kind of trying to complete in your mind is what would be as cool as getting access to all quests? What's as cool as that? Because that's the trade-off that we're trying to make here is if we went down the road of, hey, look, we're changing the way that you access quests and we're trying to make sure that VIPs are still taken care of. That's the value piece that we have to figure out the swap for. Because for the most part, most other things are like, well, yeah, this would be a cool perk. But is that perk as cool as quest access? And then you're like, well, okay, maybe not. Or it's like, does it take 20 perks to equal the quest access? And so that's what we're looking for is what to a player is like, look, I know that VIP isn't about quest gating anymore. Now VIP is going to be about what is it? What is that thing for you? And hopefully we can find something that seems pretty universal to a lot of people is this is what it means to be VIP now.
It's kind of interesting to hear your response in a little bit. And that there's kind of like an interesting history of MMOs.
Yeah.
Of back like when DDO launched, it was a subscription model. Or it was you bought it. Was it you bought it
It
once?
was a box and subscription.
Yeah,
Yep,
so you
that
bought
was
the
how
box and you subscribed, and then
it became just subscribe basically.
yeah, then there was the just subscribe. There was the whole free to play when it became DDO Unlimited, which I think was kind of new-ish for US based gaming.
Yeah.
One of the first, yeah.
And now we're kind of looking at like what is the new world of VIP and subscription and free to play look like? Because now
Yeah,
everyone's doing
exactly.
it, and yeah,
It's kind of weird because when I look at it, a lot of places are doing kind of one extreme or the other, which is either they're letting you in all of their content, but then you're, having to a la carte pay for things like what type of character you can play or your cosmetics or other things. Or some of them are the pendulum is the opposite direction, which is, oh, we'll let you put your toe in the water a little bit, but then you got to subscribe. Nobody's really doing like what we're doing, which is, yeah, we have a sub, but you could also just a la carte this stuff together if you so chose. And so I think what's happened is over time, now that so many players are kind of used to those two extremes, when they come to something like us, they don't quite know how to interact with it because they're used to being forced into one direction or the other.
there's also the fun thing that you can play DDO and unlock everything without actually spending a single dime.
Correct, which is another thing that a lot of places aren't doing. They're either doing, you're paying us in this way and getting free access, or you're subscribing. There's not really a just, or you could just work at it and earn it and play it free. So that is another contributing factor to it's like, how do we make VIP cool in that universe?
Right.
I mean, we definitely have heard loud and clear about these daily gold rolls. I don't think
Oh yeah,
anyone's of the impression about that. I mean, who doesn't? Yeah, that's. We'll see what happens there, right? But at least through the end of the year, it's going
yeah,
to be
exactly.
free.
Through the end of the year, I was like, that is a long enough time for
Yeah.
if there's something bad that's going to happen from doing that, then I'm going to know it by the end of the year.
Yes, it's bad because every day I have to log in and
I know, right?
roll
It's
it.
bad because
Yes.
every day I get
Yeah.
to like enjoy my daily life. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So far, nothing bad has happened, and so
Well,
it's
I
like,
don't know
okay,
if
cool.
if you tell me that it's gonna stick around forever. I was just thinking it'd be interesting to see how that changes my approach. Like, oh,
Right?
I'm gonna miss a day. I'm too lazy to do it this
There'll
day,
be a day in the future,
right? Because
right?
it's
Yeah,
always gonna be there as opposed to this like limited time, get as much as you can out of it, right?
yeah, yeah.
Well, let's talk about content because we've kind of touched on this a little bit. The last several years, a lot of content has begun getting kind of locked behind expansions. So, what do you see as a healthy content release schedule? We kind of talked about VIPs and content value, but what what do you see as the way that DDO is going to address releasing new content going forward? I assume we're going to see more expansions, but what does it look like inside, outside of expansions?
So I do want us to keep having like essentially every quarter-ish. I'm trying to go for a quarter, and we're obviously still working at it, but I want it to be about every quarter there's something cool to do. Sometimes it might be made thoroughly of quests, but sometimes it might be quests and some new interesting game systems, or it might be, hey, this game system is so big you don't even need quests, and you're gonna have to figure out the meta by playing through what's already good. Like that's the kind of stuff we're looking at. I actually found it really interesting, which was when people talk about content, a thing that doesn't always get brought up is things like, they'll be like, okay, there's this many quests and there's this many raids, and they don't mention is the adventure areas, which take about as much or more effort sometimes than making a quest, because somebody has to go and make that stuff. And the way that you make it is quite different than a dungeon. Our dungeons are sort of like Lego bricks that we like assemble together to make the experience. But with the adventure area, we're actually having to kind of sculpt out what's there and figure out where they like. It's just a completely different approach. But it's like, do people value it? Do they not value it? Does that change how often we want to do them? Does it change how big a particular update feels? So that's some of the stuff that I'm looking at right now. And same with like, if we take you to a new area and we don't give you that sort of public area that's like in that region, like let's say you're going to Ravenloft or something and there's no Ravenloft specific tavern, does that feel different or weird? Because that too takes quest makers to make. And so when you see us sort of flexing the size of how many quests coming out in a given release, a lot of that is based on what are those quest makers sometimes have to pivot to making that isn't specifically a quest, and then how do we make it work? So for me, what I like us doing is trying to get to quarterly releases of stuff, trying to have a sort of normal-ish quest pack is around like four-ish quests, maybe five, if it's got a really fancy story going on. Whereas times when we are needing them to pivot and do, like, let's say they need to really, go crazy on a landscape or something, then you might see smaller updates, but that are paired with big systems so that the update still feels like there's a lot to do. We want once a quarter there to feel like there's stuff to do. And the expansions are sort of the crescendo of a calendar year. And we can't always right now do a huge expansion. So that's when we started trying that experiment with Saltmarsh. We did sort of what we're calling like the mini expansion. And the idea was, okay, we want to be able to still have kind of a crescendo, but we don't want to have a crescendo that like cannibalizes our ability to do those quarterlies. And so that's the experiment that we've tried with Saltmarsh, and then we'll possibly try that again next year. Now, obviously, we won't be going back to Saltmarsh. It'll be a different, subject matter, but that's kind of the vibe that we're going for right now.
So Isle of Dread is coming soon. TM.
Yes, soon
Uh,
TM.
Did you start
No,
that?
we actually have a release date for it. Yeah.
We do.
Well,
Yep.
like June 22nd, I think,
Yep.
is the new release date.
Yep.
I'm
That's
not crazy,
correct.
right? It changed.
Yes, yeah, it
Okay.
did change. Yeah, it was always June. So originally it was June 8th. Now it's June 22nd. We were talking before we started here about the fact that, COVID's kind of still a thing and it's kind of sweeping through stuff. And when that happens,
Yeah.
you suddenly can lose somebody for like 5 days out of the schedule, which is a pretty big impact. So it's we kind of knew going in, we were all like, okay, anytime now, we got to plan for what happens if, we lose people to COVID. And it's been trickling through as the surge has started again here. But the good news is still right now, staying inside June, still looking for June 22nd now instead of the 8th.
Here's a nice little side perk of that as well. I hope I can talk about what we're doing on Lamania, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Because we're going to be previewing the raid before the release of Saltmarsh. Before the release of Isle of Dread. Sorry, we're just talking Saltmarsh. So once even though as kind of is generally the pattern we're establishing here with the raid coming out a couple of weeks after the main content release, you're going to get a chance to preview it ahead of time thanks to our kind of new schedule here.
So when we're looking at Isle of Dread, can you maybe talk about what players might expect to experience in the Isle, specifically around like, is there a design kind of philosophy or guidance, like with music? What can you tell us about? Ravenloft had a very kind of horror-ish theme. Feywild was kind of a romantic kind of fable-y kind of idea. So what's kind of driving Isle of Dread, and just kind of generally, what can you tell us besides there's dinosaurs?
Sure. So one of the things that's driving it, probably just a natural byproduct of the fact that we're dealing with dinosaurs on an island and the age demographic that several of us on the team are, we're definitely hitting that sort of adventure feeling. I'm going to say the words Jurassic and Park, but that's not, it's not what you're going to be doing. You're not going to be in there like, oh, we have to, um, you know, it's not the story, man versus man versus nature and hubris and all that. That's not quite what's happening there in terms of the story. Instead, this is more about you're going to this sort of adventuresome and lost kind of world that you're in, but it's not lost world in the sense of the world is developed all on its own and you're sort of this pristine habitat. This is more like you've been sucked into someone's trap and you're trying to figure out A, who's trapped, B, how do you get out of it, and C, how do we keep this person from causing more problems? So it's kind of weird because you're in this place that's kind of like a terrarium almost, and you're just one cog in the works in terms of the larger terrarium. But um, I think adventure best sums up. Like I think the musical score really hits the feeling this time around. Our composers are really good, and this one is when you hear it, it kind of has all of those sort of mid to late 80s, early 90s adventure tracks that you would hear in something like Raiders of the Lost Ark, or first Jurassic Park, or what's another good one, Jerry? I know that you can think of another good one from that. It's that same collection of, it's the
Yeah,
summer and you're gonna go out and see a fun blockbuster that's adventurous, but
yeah. Superman is another good one.
okay,
In
yeah, there
terms
you go,
of
that
in
music,
terms of
yeah,
classic themes, you're right. It's got
yeah,
classic themes. Our in-house composer Bill Champagne, who he's doing the music for this,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
So he has often talked about his love of movie soundtrack music, some of the classics, like your John Williams and uh, Alan Howarth and a whole bunch of others, right? I mean, the name list could go on, and so he likes to incorporate those kind of motives and themes into his work, and I think this is pretty fertile ground for that kind of thing for him. So, from what I've heard so far, which is not much, it sounds really really good. So,
Yeah.
I think I need to
And
take a
then
note next time I interview Mr. Champagne of like, is there a music you don't love? Because every time I hear about him and a music style, it's uh, I love this music. It's some of my favorite music.
yeah, he loves music, and that's why he's so good at what he does.
Yeah.
It's like a painter being, like talking about all their favorite, painters. Like, oh, I like this impressionist, and oh, I like this surrealist, and that's basically, what he's like, but from a musical standpoint. So, and that's
so
great because for DDO, like we go to so many different planes of existence and have so many different D&D settings that you kind of need that versatility in the audio and the feel and the look.
So speaking of planes of existence too, and I'm not going to get too spoilery here, but part of what's happening in Isle of Dread, I think those who know the classic module know that the island, well, and we even know from Portent of Dread that the island appears and disappears. It's shrouded in mist. It seems to be almost traveling. Why is it traveling? Where is it traveling? Who's making it travel, and why? And we're gonna answer some of those questions in Isle of Dread, and we got a big bad, if you want to use that phrase. We got kind of an enemy that's pretty well known that you can already see the name of in the Isle of Dread page. So
Yes, yes, we do name drop. We do name drop the big baddie for anybody that
yeah.
doesn't want spoilers, but I think people will be very excited about this particular character because it's one of those like really well-known D&D ones, the kind of names of legends. So it's like, ooh, what are they doing there? It's like, well, come find out.
There going to be any certain popular lore artifacts involved?
Well,
Plot.
explicitly, this is all the story is centering on the mysterious remnants and the Codex of the Infinite Planes. So that is an artifact, and this is really the culmination of the process that began way back when Eretrikos tried to use it to end
Right.
the Devil and Demon War. So yeah, we have an artifact. It's a pretty key part of the story.
No, I was talking about the
I know which one he's talking
yeah.
about.
Okay.
Which two,
The-
in fact.
yeah, there we go. Now we're on the same page. So I got two more questions about Isle of Dread. One, if you don't move in front of a T-Rex, are you safe?
Oh no, oh no.
And two, what's your favorite new monster?
Oh, it's so okay. Are we doing spoilers or no spoilers? Because there's one new monster that's like I don't. If I tell you about it, it'll kind of spoil it the first time you meet it. And in which case, then I can pivot back to something a little more safe.
I think we've given a spoiler warning enough there. So if go ahead and give the spoilery
Yeah,
one,
yeah,
and
just la
come
la
back
la
in
la,
a
scrub
minute.
past like the
Yeah.
scrub past the next like 60 seconds to 2 minutes if you don't want spoilers about this creature. So I am really excited about something very, I'll call it very small, but I just think it's neat, which is piranhas. So most of the time when you have big monsters, everybody's ready for dinosaurs, but the piranhas I think are great because one of the lesser used but interesting D&D encounters is anytime you have to deal with a swarm of something, because a swarm is like, well, it's not really like one creature where you're striking its vulnerables, and the way you kind of interact with a swarm is you kind of have to just either get away from it or disperse it or things like that. And then this one's particularly interesting because it's not that often that you deal with water hazards in DDO in that way. A lot of times it's like spike traps and blade traps and stuff like that. But this is like natural little creature, little baby fish guys, and I just thought it was really neat.
Sounds
You know,
interesting.
I think I think I might go with Piranha now too. Although it's hard because I myself have been looking at dinosaur pics for a few weeks now. So for me, it's still the monster that I'm looking forward to. That isn't the dinosaur, is the dinosaur. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I just am. Yeah.
Okay, is there a particular dinosaur? That's my thing. Is like if we go the safe route where everybody knows that there's going to be dinosaurs, it's like, do we pick a particular dinosaur that is a favorite?
I like the one in our iconic Tabaxi shot. I can't remember what the formal name of it is, but the one with the long neck.
Oh yeah, like the big yeah.
Yeah,
Technically, it's
I'm
like
really glad we
something
have
of
that one because
brontosaur basically.
yeah, because not every creature has to be like your meat, right? And
Right.
so it's really cool to be able to bring that in as well, even if it's a kind of small thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This feels like an
I
appropriate
like
pick
that.
from the vegetarian.
Yeah. It's also funny because I really liked the you see them as both a hireling and as a mount. But like we've had raptors for a while. We've had them ever since we went to Sharn. Um, but like the new feathered raptors, I was like, ooh, those turned out really good.
One of the other things that's coming with update 55 is a level increase. So we're just kind of what does the team kind of hope to achieve by increasing the level, and maybe as much as you're able to, can you give us kind of an idea of what leveling, not necessarily like the details, but maybe like the timeline ish, roughly of what does it look like to go from level 30 to 40?
So one of the things we know is that it's not generally healthy for the game if everybody is sort of parked at a max for too long. And too long is kind of a qualitative thing more than a quantitative thing. But we know that there are people that love to make alts. There's people that love to do their loops with their reincarnations, right? But then there's people that really just enjoy that kind of progressing somebody all the way up and moving along and tuning a build higher and higher and higher. And right now, if you sit too long with a cap, that chunk of players is kind of left out because they're like, well, I really don't want to start over because I just got all these cool abilities, like, and I want to be able to keep using them. Like, if you hit 30 and you get all these really awesome abilities, you're like, well, if I'm reincarnating, then I'm not getting to use the cool abilities that I just unlocked myself. So that's one aspect of it. In terms of pacing wise, um, we're currently looking at the last time we did, when we broke 20 and started heading for 30 and sort of the way that those came out. We're currently looking at, do we want the pace that happened, or we want to go maybe faster or slower? We're still talking through that. But what we do know is we're not going to drop like 8 levels on your head like in one update, right? Like we're not going to do like that. It's going to be sprinkled out, right? Likely 2, maybe 3 tops levels at a time. But then the course of how long do those get spread across? Is it, we bump up every year? Do we bump up every other year? Like what pace do we want? Because part of it is how fast do we want to move you along? And part of it is how fast can we build? And so between those two dynamics, that's kind of what we're looking at. And then we also have to have sensitivities to, hey, when we do these increases, guess what? Those folks that are doing their reincarnation loops, they need to know how is that going to work for them above level 30? Like what does reincarnation look like above there? Or if we have epic destinies now, right? What do epic destinies look like as you start getting into legendary, right? And so we're going through the exercise now of talking about how each of these things harmoniously fit with everybody, but we knew there was just no question that we definitely want to start getting you moving again, and that dread seemed like the perfect time to start. And it was a fairly harmless jump because we knew that the consequences of going up just that small amount of levels wasn't going to rock the boat, and that gives us lots of racetrack to still refine and tune the other things that we want to be doing.
If you want to get a deep dive into it, we do have a preview thread up on the Lamania forums of the DDO forums that really gets into all the details about your feats and when you're going to get your feats and all that sort of thing. For example, in legendary levels, we are going to give you a little bit of a bump in each level just naturally for melee ranged universal spell power. There's a few little bits like that. For example, reincarnation isn't legendary reincarnation, isn't happening here. We're only going up to level 32, and we're going to be able to preserve your legendary XP when you epic reincarnate, for example, so that you won't be losing out on that legendary XP should you choose to go do an epic reincarnation. And there's kind of a whole bunch of little bits like that, and most of that's outlined on the forums. It is a work in progress, of course, but it's a pretty solid plan for what we're working toward.
I would imagine too that there will be another preview of Update 55 coming soon-ish that will have updates to said information as well.
Yes, we will definitely be having more Lamanias, so be on the lookout for those. So that is definitely what's coming.
You briefly mentioned kind of this tension between having players that are sitting at cap and maybe like or investing in like one character by going through a reincarnation cycles. How do you approach how do you approach that tension of having cap level content but also supporting people that want to send characters through reincarnation cycles and then adding alts into that kind of whole calculus?
Yeah, so when we're tackling any of these big chunks of the game, what we try to do when we're discussing them is we'll talk about the goal that we're trying to meet for that slice of the players. So let's say that we're talking about we're trying to deal with low cap increase and the people that will be leveling along. And then we go, what does a reincarnation person do while this is happening? What's the experience like for them? And are there any weird little bridges that we need to build to help them in this new dynamic, whatever that dynamic happens to be? Or, hey, something about what we're doing gonna cause people that have a bunch of alts to be in a weird place? Or we just, as we're looking at things, we always kind of have to, you're sort of like trading hats as you're talking through it. Like, well, if I'm a reincarnation person, what's that going to mean to me? It also helps that a lot of us, when we all play with different styles ourselves. So like me, I oscillate between playing solo with a bunch of hirelings, and then I have my static group where some of us are really, really extremely skilled people, and some of us are like beer and pretzels style and just kind of along for the ride. Some of them, we've got one friend of mine that he is a machine when it comes to reincarnating. I mean, I can talk to him Monday and by Friday, he's already like done a couple, he's just doing those loops so well and efficiently. He's got his rhythm down that when we're playing for the night, if I ever hit a situation where we say, hey, as a group, we want to go play blah, if there's ever a moment where he goes, oh, I can't play with you, that's a red flag for me. Like, I don't like players to be in a state where they can't play with who they want to play with. They might all be working on different goals individually, but they should still be able to generally find a way to play together. If you've ever played, there's a board game that I really like, Lords of Waterdeep. If you ever played Lords of Waterdeep, the thing I really love about that board game is that whatever your plan is, if somebody else makes a move that causes you to not be able to do that plan, the way that game plays, you always feel like you have another move that you could make that still feels productive. You never feel like you're completely stuck and completely screwed. And that's always how I want a DDO player to feel, is that if somebody's like, oh, I'm working on my past lives tonight, you never feel like you're going to have to be like, oh, I need to go help so-and-so work on their past lives and I don't get to do anything that I want to do. Instead, there should always be ways for you to be like, oh, you're working on your past lives? Well, that's cool. I need to go do this thing over here and we can do that together. That's what I like to see happen.
It seems like some of what you're saying is maybe why you're looking at having it so you keep your legendary XP and why there's conversations happening about keeping your epic XP through reincarnations that aren't those reincarnations.
Yeah, those are the types of things that we look through, exactly.
So
and trust me, it's a lot. There's so many different ways that people like to play, and you're like, okay, how do I make all these things happy together?
Yeah. if you ever lived in a house with a cat or a couple of cats and a couple of dogs, and they all like to be fed at the same time, it's a little bit like a little bit like that. But the answer is, you do your best, and you want everyone to be happy, right? So you just do your best to make it happen, right?
I want to shift a little bit to the Epic Destiny system because just did a big revamp of it. 6 months ago?
Yes.
So, and part of that was this idea of if expanding it, adding new destinies, that kind of thing. So, just like to check in, what does that look like? Do you have any idea of what that could be, and what kind of goals the team has around building out the Epic Destiny system?
Yeah, so there's a couple things with Epic Destinies. One of the things we wanted to accomplish with Epic Destinies was under the old way that they had been built, the system was sort of caged in and had no room to grow. And if you wanted to try to add to it, it was not only really laborious from a design perspective, it was also really laborious and challenging from a technical perspective too. And it meant that if you were going to try to add to it, it was like so much work. You were like, I'm never going to get back out of it what we're going to have to invest to try to expand the thing. And that's why we just basically like, look, we got to kind of start fresh. And so the goal was, let's build a system that A, can expand out, B, is easier for us to implement when we want to add new stuff to it, and C, that we have a sort of long-term vision, which I don't want to spoil because I much prefer for the systems folks to be able to maybe pop on and talk about it themselves. But the idea is that when we're designing this stuff, that we don't just design it for, okay, this one little set of levels. That, okay, how will this system expand with the life of DDO? Because obviously we're trying to run DDO until infinity. So how do we make the system work with infinity? And so that's what we were trying to do with Epic Destinies. And so the first thing we had to do was, okay, step one, make the system set it the way that you've all seen it right now. Do people like it? Like, we have to let people kind of ruminate with it and play with it for a little while to see if they actually like it. And if they do, then we start thinking through, okay, at what points do we want to inject expansion? Sorry, I used expansion there, that's not the right word. Because I mean as to expand, not as in content drop. So do we want it to happen in, is one tree at a time like too many, too few? Do we need batches of them? Like, how do we want to continue to expand out? And right now it seems like what we're leaning towards is we want destinies to be, when you introduce a destiny, that you're able to sort of digest that destiny as a destiny as opposed to a smattering of destinies, to let people really think about how they will incorporate that destiny into a build. So I'm really excited to see what we do. It'll be pacing wise. I don't think that we're going to be like, oh my god, every other month it's a new destiny, and you're like, oh my god, I can't figure out my build. Like, we need to let you actually play with them.
I would just mention we're expanding up in addition to out. Isle
Yeah.
of Dread, for example, includes the fourth core of the existing 12 Epic Destinies. So the team's working, in both directions really at the same time with these things.
I do want to maybe correct or kind of dial in a little bit on the language use. It's coming with update 55. You don't have to get Isle of Dread to get access
Correct.
to that, to the
Correct.
fourth cores. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Just wanted
absolutely.
to make sure that people didn't get a wrong, and you don't need to get Isle of Dread to go up past level 30 or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the nice thing about expansion time that we talk about is expansions aren't just the quests that come in the package. There's also a whole bunch of stuff that we do for everybody else, even if you're not buying the actual quests at that point. There are improvements and big changes that we tend to also align with that same time. So that if you're somebody that's not interested in Isle of Dread, there's still stuff for you to do too.
Right. Wanted to talk about Reaper mode a little bit. How do you kind of discuss and look at the idea of keeping Reaper mode fresh, fun, challenging, and keeping that edge for players who really like to push the boundaries of what's possible?
Usually we talk about it from the standpoint of how do we shake up the meta? Like, the meta seems to be the best way to inject challenge because people sort of, I don't want to say memorize, but you kind of memorize your technique and the way that your technique applies. And so then if we shake things up a little bit, all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I gotta readjust what I'm doing here. And so now you're like, ooh, this thing that I tried before isn't quite working the way I want. So that's one aspect of it. Second aspect of it is no matter what metrics we set, right? When they're like, okay, we'll do this, and this. I'm like, just assume, just always add like an extra like 20 on top of that, right? Just do it. Because like people can be so good at the game, like you just can't even predict. Like we never expected anybody to be able to get above like Reaper like 5 back when we first made Reaper system, and you can see there's already like people like it didn't take that long before there were already people who were trying to chew off at 10, and it was like, ooh.
I do remember the day Reaper launched. Some people in my guild like, all right, let's go into Legendary Shroud and R10 and see what it's like. It hurt a lot. The second time we went in, we killed a monster.
Yeah.
So the game has changed a lot since then. But
Exactly.
I think
And sometimes we approach it not just from like making numbers bigger. Sometimes we just change what abilities, either what abilities can do, or what monsters' abilities can do, or what monsters react to with your abilities. And that's what I mean about that meta shakeup. Is like, what can we tune to make it different than the way it is?
I've been hearing the team do some talking about some of our most invested players of Reaper. You know, we have not a huge number, but some players who are super into Reaper who have a lot of extra Reaper points to spend. And so I know I've been hearing some discussions on that side from the team about, well, you know, how can we best give them something to do with it, and also maybe kind of fix that little bit so that it doesn't happen again, maybe to some extent. You know, where people have where the system is, you're not sort of sitting there waiting, right? So I think we might be taking a look at that sometime in the future, but I don't know that, you know, we're really in a position to say today what that resolution will be.
Because we've always had the big challenge for us with Reaper is making it a system that for the people who really love challenge, that they feel satisfied with that. But for everybody else who will never be as skilled as those players, and like no matter how hard they try, they're just going to get frustrated and not have fun. How do we set them up to not feel like because they can't do Reaper, they can't enjoy DDO, right? So that's what we're trying to be careful about. What can you spend your Reaper points on?
Yep. Let's talk about guilds a little bit. Is there any plans to kind of fill out the amenities options so we can actually like fill the airship?
We are talking about guilds, yes. So one of the things we talked about with guilds when you're talking about, amount of quests, right? Remember that adding a guild amenity is basically taking a dungeon maker off making a dungeon. Like you wouldn't think that it's that much work when you look at them. You're like, what? It's a room on an airship, but just the way that it is under the hood, it's actually quite a bit of work. And so we always are in that, okay, is now the time that we want to sacrifice a dungeon to add the room to the airship? So instead of the way I want to approach this is we will be talking, it's not going to happen within this calendar year, but the process of after Dread here, we'll be diving in more deeply of talking about, what else will guilds get to do as they continue to level? What will that mean for them? What are things we can do for guilds that maybe, if we know it's so expensive for us to build these rooms, well, what else can we give guilds? We've talked about things like, do we want to let guilds have some, interesting options for like branching out into personal housing type things and all kinds of stuff. But I want us to be looking at giving guilds more advancement. They've been kind of like I said, they're sitting at that cap for quite a while now. So I want them to be able to continue to have progression and work on things together and get really cool stuff. That's one of the things I really like about our guild system is it's not just like, oh, you unlock a house and you decorate it and that's what you do. Like you're actually getting like cool perks and like it's very interesting to have a guild and to advance it. So I want to see us expand that, and that is one of the things on our radar that we'll be working on.
Put me in the category of I'd love there to be something to do with renown when you're guild capped.
Yeah.
Same with like you're talking about Reaper XP, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm getting Reaper XP, but I can't spend the points anywhere. It always feels better to be able to do something with that, even if it's like a spending process or something like that.
Yeah.
Are there any updates with racial variants? So the idea of, is it something that you might look to kind of flesh out some more, or is it kind of on the table for back burner for now? Anything along those lines?
It's a little tabled right now. They're kind of situational. The first ones that we introduced, like the wood elf, it was about the fact that we wanted, when we looked at the elves that we had, because those elves had been in the game since we first came out, and since we were only restricted to Eberron, and the Eberron, what they call style guide, right? Every story setting is like, this is how these creatures look. The Eberron style guide that DDO had at the time that it was made had the elves look in a very certain way, and they had to have certain features and certain skin color and all this other stuff. And we were like, okay, the way an Eberron elf looks isn't always what people think of when they think of other types of fantasy elves, in terms of like even like the ears, right? Like the shape of the ears and stuff. So uh, the goal of the variants was to give people another, like if they looked at elf, it was like, okay, you can have these Eberron style ones, or you can have maybe something more Forgotten Realmsy, or things like that. So not every character race has that issue going for it. Like if I look at a Tabaxi right now, for example, I'm like, we covered the whole gambit with Tabaxi. But so it was really about tackling some of those ones that had been in since 2006, where we wanted to kind of refresh them and see what we could do. So we've talked about, do we want to go back and tune like halflings? Do we want to tune dwarves? And so we've sort of been going right around, because it was like, how excited are people for them? Because if they're not super excited about it, the feedback I had gotten on the Wood Elves, for example, was kind of lukewarm. So unless there's a whole bunch of Wood Elf fans out there, they're like, no, yes, more racial variants, please. We're not in a hurry to do new ones. We're just, what we are focused on is when we do new playable races, making sure that those have enough variety in them that you feel like you can really have what you're looking to make.
So when you're looking for opportunities to give feedback to SSG, don't just look for the things you want. When you get something that's really amazing and you love, give them that feedback too.
Please tell us. I know humans, our human minds, we remember things that make us unhappy 2 times or more than things that make us happy. And so definitely tell us about those things that make you happy so we can do more of it.
Right.
Yeah, I think there again. Speaking of brainstorming, there are an unlimited number of things we could go for. I mean, we could easily identify dwarf, human, halfling, and do do racial variants on pretty much any of those things. So I don't think coming up with the racial variants is the question. I think we ourselves have a lot of things that we could do there, but I think it's just a matter of we're working on some other things. So.
And then you have to play the game of, well, does that make more sense as a racial variant or as an iconic class?
Right, that too,
Yeah.
right. And also just the work that goes in, right? Because even though Wood Elf, you're like, well, it just looks a little visual. Well, it still comes with all the work of making a brand new character base, because you have to replicate out all the animations, you have to replicate out all the armors, because it's a different, it's underscore Wood Elf instead of just underscore Elf, and so there's a whole bunch of work that comes with it. That's like, would I rather spend that work on a totally brand new race, like, I don't know, Thrycreen or something, right? Like what would I rather do?
Like Tabaxi.
Yeah, Tabaxi was a lot of work, right? Like they've got those funky legs, they've got big tails to worry about, they have completely different facial features, and we went through this phase where we're like, if they don't blink, does it look weird? Because their eyes are just so much more prominent than they are in a lot of our other types of characters. And so like there's all this stuff that comes with making a new interesting character race.
Tabaxi blink, by the way. They're the
Yes,
first
they do.
blinking race in DDO.
Yeah.
That's exciting. I did not
Once you
notice
see
that.
it, you'll never unsee it.
Well, I'm always looking at the back of my head, so
Exactly, that's what I mean. But then you'll be standing in a quest sometime, you'll see your friend standing next to you, and you're like, wait a
Right.
minute.
No, yeah, it's always kind of a fun little thing that I almost kind of wonder, based on the last couple races that have been chosen. It's like, wait, which one of the dev team is like, no, let's do this race, but there's this like super challenging thing. Yeah, I know. It'll be great to play with that. Let's do that race. Like, there must
We
be
all
at least
have
one
kind
or
of like
two
our
of those, right?
favorites, right?
Yeah.
There's like our pile of like monsters that we love and our pile of playable character races that we love, and then we all like sort of like start lobbying each other, like, when can we get an Aarakocra? Like, that's kind of the process sometimes, because
Yeah.
It's you talk about, what can I bring as like a producer? Like one of the things is liking. Sometimes we've had producers that are sort of, I am here to be a game industry developer, make games. Whereas for me, I'm like, how do I make DDO the best DDO that it can be, right? And you only know that when you're people that engage with the material.
So last question. We'll end on inventory. What's being looked at, done, kind of coming down the pike for? Hey, we've got lots of stuff in our inventory that we want to keep, and a limited amount of space.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. So one is we're looking at upgrading the character bank. So yeah, there's two types of bank, right? There's the shared bank that lets you pass stuff back and forth on all your characters, and then there's just like the bank that is on that particular character. So we're looking to revamp that. We had done sort of a little kind of alpha preview of it at one point and identified some issues and sort of pulled it back. But so now, armed with that knowledge, the engineers are going back and be trying to get that out this year is the goal. It won't be with Dread, I don't think, but it will be inside the year. And then the other thing we looked at was one of the other problems is, we make these expansions and stuff in these packages where you get like all the cool knickknacks, right? And it's like, yeah, I love having like all these different dinosaurs and I love having all these different outfits. And it's like, oh my gosh, where do I put all this stuff? So we don't want somebody to feel like, oh, I went to go for the ultimate fan and now because I'm the ultimate fan, my inventory is just completely blown out. Like that's not a good experience. So we started this experiment with Saltmarsh. We're doing it again with Dread. And if it continues to go well, we thought, there's lots of different ways we could purchase. What if we do a sort of a wardrobe type thing where you can throw your cosmetics in there, and we were like, yeah, but then it's still kind of like inventory management for at that point. So we were like, okay, what if we just don't even have you hang on to the stuff? What if this NPC hangs on to it for you? And so you'll notice that now what happens is with your cosmetics, there's an NPC for the expansion. For anybody that's gotten the collectors of the Ultimate Edition, that anytime you need a cosmetic, you just go up and talk to them. And let's say you get to a point where you put on your cosmetic outfit, you're enjoying it for a while, and then you're like, I'm tired of this one. I want to change it. Just throw them away because you can go back to the NPC. If you ever want to go back to that outfit, just go back to the NPC and get a new outfit. So the idea was instead of having the player having to wrangle this in their inventory or like the mount stables and things like that, it's like just go talk to the NPC when you need it, and then you don't even have to mess with it, and it's at lower cost for us to implement. Because if we had to do it the other way, where we're actually dealing with like wardrobes for like hundreds or thousands of items, that's going to take a lot longer than me just putting things on an NPC that you can go talk to freely whenever you want.
Have you thought about putting in those NPCs for previous expansions?
I've been thinking about it. Yeah, we have to think through a little bit of. There's some technical stuff about the way the game decides when it gives you things, and some things were sort of grouped together into some inventory things. And what will happen if we kind of split that stuff up if you already had that on you? But that is a thing that I'm talking about going through is like, well, maybe we chip away at it, right? Maybe we can't do them all in one fell swoop. Maybe we're like, okay, today we're going to do this with Shadowfell, and now we're going to do this with Motu, and just lean it down so that people can get some of this stuff that they really like, that they enjoy, but they don't want to be hanging on to it like all the time.
Right.
Again, just to drop a little hint, I've been hearing some people talk about ways we may be able to do some quality of life work, specifically as it relates to those little teleporter items too.
I think that's actually in the release notes, right?
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay,
There
good,
was,
good.
yeah. One of the devs was able to actually we had been sort of like working this on the side, like, okay, I just want you to spend like a few minutes chipping away at seeing how tough would it be to do to make sort of a keyring type experience. And it turned out it was something that was possible. So we're like, okay, we're gonna try it, because that was another thing where it's like it's kind of goofy. Like you couldn't use the NPC solution because then the whole point of it is instant teleport access, and if you have to run to the NPC to go get it, it kind of defeats the purpose. So we were like, okay, well, what if instead of putting it like this was a place where we could try to do more of that like mount stable type solution.
Well, hey, thanks very much for being here. Anything you want to just give a shout out to as we close out for the evening?
Just thanks everybody for listening, and I have a lot of love for DDOcast. Right, this is home for me. Right, like DDO is home, and so is DDOcast. So I really enjoy like all the different contributors in the DDO fan community who've just been generously giving of their time and their love of the game, and it really makes my day to still see like all these great communities just thriving together. So just really appreciate you all being here.
I would just give a quick shout out to the fine folks over at twitch.tv/DDO stream. We have a bunch of DDO players who stream over there every week, every day of the week. So you can find the schedule over there. And we'd love to see some people in chat. If you're interested, let me know. We might be able to bring in some new people. I myself will be coming back to streaming probably in the fall here, maybe summer if we can make it happen. And we do have, however, a preview that is in the works. Exact time TBA. But we're looking for something like the Friday prior to launch of Isle of Dread. So potentially something like the 17th-ish, we will be doing a Twitch preview with some members of the stream team or the DDO team as well, to just kind of do some Q&A, run through a little bit of Isle of Dread, and do just kind of a general, hey, let's get hype ahead of the weekend and take some Q&A. So that's something to look forward to as well.
Yeah.
Oh, and some articles on DDO.com. I actually have a couple of them I'm writing. One on a level cap increase. We're going to talk a little bit about that and put it in a place on DDO.com that people who don't go to the Lamania forums essentially can read. not that people, because we want long term. It's like, so in
Yeah, you don't want to have to
July,
dig back and
yeah.
find the
So
discussion.
in
Yeah,
July,
this
you
would
can
just be
just go
right
there
there.
and you'll see the level cap stuff. And we're also working on a little bit about like making a Violet Dread and music and some other good things too. So some cool stuff to check out on DDO.com in the coming weeks.
I do always enjoy when you get the music on YouTube.
Yeah, that'll be happening.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thanks for listening. Thanks to Cordovan and Tolero for joining us today. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit our website at DDOCast.com, or you can support us on Patreon. You can also find us on social media, and for our latest cast updates at DDOCast is the best place. And you can find show notes, past shows, and more on our website at DDOCast.com. If you'd like to join the discussion, you can leave a comment or email us at DDOCast@gmail.com. Jerry, you want to take us out?
Yeah, I'd love to. May all your attack rolls be crits and all your chests level appropriate. Have fun and don't forget to gather for buffs.